And welcome back to Beer Fueled Fantasy Football. We are going to go ahead and continue our State of the League series here today. I'm Nick Sparts, at Nick Sparts on Twitter. We got Dan Thurry to my right.
At their BFF. Oh, what's up, guys?
And joining us on the line is not Christopher Hopper. He is not here today. But we do have a guest on, so it worked out well. We've got Jordan McNamara from UTHDynasty.com and analyticsofdynasty.com and at McNamara Dynasty on Twitter. Jordan, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. How are you?
Doing great. I'm glad we were able to finally get you on. I know we touched base on this back in October, I think, but we weren't doing guests at that point. You hadn't finished the book yet, but book's done from what I understand, and you got it on sale on your site.
Yeah, the book's done finally. After I think about 10 months, it's done, and yeah, you can purchase it now. Analyticsofdynasty.com is my website. If you throw a shop on the back end of that, so analyticsofdynasty.com/shop, my book's there. There's two different options for it. You can get just the book. It comes immediately as a download. You can get it for $30, or if you want to do a one-on-one strategy session with me, we'll talk team building, one-on-one, talk about your team, startup drafts, whatever you want to talk about. You can do that as well as the book for $50. So I actually just had one right before we got on. I just was talking to someone. So they're really good. They're a lot of fun. I learn a lot from them, and I think that folks take some good things, and I've seen some championships built on some of the things that we did in our strategy session. So it's been good.
I'm glad to hear that. I did check out the site right before we started recording here. It's a cool looking site. It's got his Twitter feed right built into it. So if you want an easy way to keep track of what his activity on Twitter, you can jump right there on the website. And he also had a bunch of early declarations there if you're looking for a nice clean list of those skill players who have declared early. It's something we definitely keep tabs on here, but we don't have a published website that we throw it on, so that'd be a good resource for all the listeners out there who want that type of information. I've been aware of Jordan for quite a long time. I saw him write for UTH for a few years before we even got in the podcast game, so I'm glad we were able to get you on this episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
All right. And as always, where you can find all the Beer Fueled stuff, it's Beer Fueled FF on Twitter, Instagram, and Untapped if you want to see the can art, see the beer reviews on each individual episode, Beer Fueled Fantasy Football if you prefer your podcast in video form, and hit us up at Beer Fueled FF or beerfueledfantasy@gmail.com if you're interested in supporting us on Patreon, if you're interested in sending us beer to get us something to review, or interested in any merchandise that we have available on the show. We'll happily get that all to you guys. We appreciate everyone who reaches out. Let's go ahead and jump into a beer preview. All right, and in Springfield, Illinois here, we are rocking Giantsbane by Fair State Brewing Company, based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. First time we've had Fair State on the show. And it's a double American stout, comes in at 8% ABV. It's black, roasted, and hefty according to Fair State. And that is Giantsbane. I'll give you a full review once we're through the first 12 running backs on today's episode. Jordan, are you drinking anything today?
I held off for now. Maybe by the end I'll get one, but I held off for now.
We heavily encourage it if you do want to jump in and join.
We will not judge you harshly. I swear.
All right, and before we get to today's state of the running back position portion, we're going to go ahead and talk a few news items with you guys. News. All right, starting off in the uninspiring category, we've got the Jets hiring Dowell Loggins as the offensive coordinator quarterbacks coach, so he travels with Adam Gase from Miami to the Jets.
God. His offenses have been bad.
Yeah, because he was with the Bears previously, and it was also not so great there.
I mean, I get it. He didn't have a lot to work with, but it's not like, the Jets have a whole stable of people to work with either.
Yeah, this is not the type of hire that I expect to jumpstart the Jets offense.
Yeah, it's not surprising that Gase brings this guy with him, but I was surprised that Loggins was getting head coaching interviews. It was just surprising with how I thought during offense was pretty uninspired. It's probably a combination of the lack of Tannehill's development as well as I think some of the surrounding talent. I just don't think they had a ton of talent on offense there generally, but we're just going to basically ship that 2,500 miles up the coast to New York, and same division and everything. It shouldn't be, the Patriots got to be loving this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a team that has a ton of cap room, a ton of young pieces that could have been developing into something, but I just wasn't overly impressed with the Gase hire and now bringing Loggins in. I think that might just be slowing down the development of that offense.
Yeah, it's a wait and see. I mean, well, I'm not very inspired. I'm not going to go out and draft, obviously, Jets players and redraft either way, or go out there and try to buy some players in Dynasty. Maybe McGuire's got some intrigue to him because he's cheap. But
I mean, there's a few players that are of interest. I'm not going to completely write off the team, but the idea that this team might have a jump start in the second year of, why
Sam Darnold.
Darnold? Why did I just blank on that? I'm off my game, and then we're not doing 3 weeks anymore. With Darnold, I don't think there's going to be the second year jump we were quite hoping for. Nothing else on that. We'll go ahead and move on to the next OC that was hired, and Bengals hired Raiders quarterback coach Brian Callahan as offensive coordinator. I believe they're still waiting on the quarterback's coach from the Rams to be their head coach. That's been rumored but not officially confirmed yet. But that would make sense that they haven't hired anybody, considering they're still waiting for them to finish the Super Bowl here for him to be available.
Yeah, I'm interested in I think the Bengals are a really interesting team in terms of they go out and they sort of go right to the McVay coaching tree, which is becoming a thing really quickly. It's pretty amazing. But I think there's talent there that just wasn't brought out in terms of, I don't think Mixon was used to its full effect. I think there's more there for Andy Dalton, assuming he's back and healthy. I think there's some pieces on this team that with AJ Green, he's still getting, he's not getting any younger, but I still think he's plenty capable of performing as a wide receiver one. I think there's some reason for optimism in this, in the entire Bengals situation. And you look at the division, and I watched the Ravens offense. It doesn't really scare me. Ben's not getting any younger. I mean, you could see a scenario where the Cleveland's really the powerhouse in this division, but it can be much more, I think, spread out than it has been with, I think, the Steelers and the Bengals really dominating it of late.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think I'm not really sure what he's going to bring in terms of being able to look and find stuff. I mean, you're coming as a Raiders, QB coach. Derek Carr never really did anything for me, so hopefully he finds himself to be a better play caller. And, we can see Mixon in his usage. We get to see what he can do with Tyler Boyd and AJ Green. John Ross is a first-round top 10 pick. And, Dalton's a guy that I don't, I like to see if I can get in Dynasty, especially in, super flex and 2 QB leagues. And as you said before, or as you just said, that whole AFC North is a big toss-up. I'm a big Ravens fan. I'm not quite sure I believe in Lamar Jackson as a long-term answer there, and you just hit on, Big Ben about to retire. This could be the Battle of Ohio for the North.
Yeah. Also, Callahan has never been an OC before. He's only been a assistant or QB coach, so he doesn't have much of a track record, so it'll be interesting to see what type of system he brings.
Yep.
But there's a lot of pieces there to like, and the other one that wasn't mentioned was Tyler Boyd.
Oh, no, I mentioned Tyler Boyd.
No, so I kept waiting to
wake up.
Kidding. But yeah, you got Boyd, Green, Mixon, all solid pieces. They've added a couple pieces to the offensive line. I expect they continue to do that. So this offense should continue the trajectory it was on early in the season before the injuries derailed it.
Yep.
All right. Titans promote tight ends coach Arthur Smith to offensive coordinator. Of note, he did not have a Wikipedia article before getting this promotion.
Wow.
They can't feel good, right? I mean, their whole situation's interesting, and I everyone was down on them this year, and I think there was a lot of it was Mariota hand wringing, and there were some questions about the LaFleur hire in terms of look what he did in Tennessee. It was interesting to me that I actually think that I went the other way on that, which is that they tried to do something that wasn't working, and I think totally flipped over their scheme and what they were doing at the end of the season, really trying to rely on Henry to get them into the playoffs at the end of the season. Ultimately, they come up short, but I think Mariota, I don't know about you guys, I think Mariota was I think he was hurt more than anyone realized. And, there's some pieces to that offense. I don't know much about their new offensive coordinator, but I think there's pieces of that offense that I really like, especially Corey Davis. I mean, I'm big on Corey Davis right now at this particular time. I think his price is down in Dynasty. I think the narrative on that is something I can't quite understand in terms of how people are talking him down. I'm really interested, especially I don't think it's an inspiring hire, so I don't think it'll boost up a guy like Davis's stock. So I'm really interested in a guy like Corey Davis right now.
Kind of on the Corey Davis thought, I am excited. It's going to be his third year, so that should be some good news. But are we at all concerned about the fact that Mariota just can't seem to stay healthy and they don't have a real answer at backup quarterback?
That and like the offense continues to change. They're changing. You know, this is the second or third coaching
five OCs in 5 years.
Yeah, and that's on top of the injury, it's going to stunt the growth of a guy like Mariota, who wasn't a top flight passing quarterback prior at all. So while I like to buy Corey Davis, I love Corey Davis. Would like to see him break out. I don't know how much of a ceiling he's going to have in this offense. Now you can utilize the draft type that's coming with this, and people love the wide receiver draft class this year. Maybe buy Corey Davis for cheaper than you could ever get at this point. That's where I'm intrigued. We also like John Smith here. Taywan Taylor showed up a little bit. I'm not a Derrick Henry truther, so I don't really care about him. And he, tends to have the same track record every year anyways. But I'm intrigued to see how this offense shapes out, especially during the case of the offseason.
One thing I would ask you guys is, like, I think people are talking down Corey Davis, and I look at his 2018 season and try and figure out a way in which it could be worse, and I can't really find it. I mean, just from his efficiency perspective, he basically finishes the season with 1.6 yards with fantasy points per target. It's 1.59. That's basically 0.2 of a point below what you would expect in terms of what the historical averages are. So he got bad efficiency on top of, I think, just a bad draw at quarterback with Mariota hurt and constantly banged up, and Gabbert didn't do much. I think he finishes as wide receiver 26, right? That basically represents a worst case scenario for him. And I mean, I can see a top 12. I certainly think top 12 wide receivers in his range of outcomes. I think that's the type of talent that he is. It's just a question of how much it can come together. But from a dynasty perspective, he's the exact type of receiver that I love to target, because I think his price is down, and people just don't see a ceiling there. That I think this is a floor, not a ceiling for him.
If anyone thinks this is the ceiling, they're definitely not reading the tea leaves correctly, I think. But I think the concern with a lot of owners and people who are considering looking at buying him but not quite sure is this going to be closer to the norm than the ceiling?
Yeah, I'm like, if I could get him as my wide receiver 3 or 4 and not, try to buy him as a 2 on my team, I would feel a hell of a lot better. And I've already reached out to owners in my leagues to see where they feel about him, and a lot of those guys are in the wait and hold instead of trying to, sell off right away. But that's just 4 different leagues.
I am hoping that a couple of these rookie wide receivers, though, flash at the combine and start getting some hype going, though. Because if that happens and the value on these picks can go up, then I can start looking at some of the players like Davis and really try to buy them.
It will.
I saw a conversation on Twitter the other day where it was like Corey Davis or 105. And I thought that was, clearly Corey Davis. And people were like, it wasn't that clear in terms of the vote. I think it was pretty close to that 50-50. But, yeah, to your point, if it's going to be a situation where this class is going to rise a little bit in perception, Corey Davis is a guy that I would love to buy at that mid-first price.
Yeah, 105, without having a full scout of this class done yet, I couldn't quite say for certain how I'd feel about that. Probably Corey Davis, but if it can get to the point where it starts talking like 107, 108, 109 for Corey Davis, that would be awesome.
I'll say this right now. This is a very wide open class. Like, anything can happen, and it's not just hashtag landing spot matters at this point. There's a lot that can go into this, where there's a lot of people are very fluid on certain players already.
Yep. All right. Quick note on a defensive firing here. Chiefs fired defensive coordinator Bob Sutton. They brought in ex-Giants DC Steve Spagnuolo, I think it's pronounced.
Sure.
He's got a decent history with working with some less than ideal pieces. He generally has a pretty good pass rush, so Chiefs defense should at least be a little better next year rather than second worst in the NFL.
They can't get much worse.
Maybe they'll learn how to rush Brady without just 4 guys. That's all I'll say.
Yep. Cam Newton underwent arthroscopic surgery on his right throwing shoulder on Thursday. This was the minor version of the procedure. My concern is if this is just maybe a first step and they hope it works and they may have to actually have him have the full surgery.
Andrew Luck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not excited for 2019 Cam Newton right now. But beyond, we'll see.
Yeah, it is definitely going to bring up the Andrew Luck narrative with him. It's good. I think it's good that it wasn't a full on surgery in terms of, it seems to be lesser than what the worry was, I guess is what I would say. I'm obviously not a doctor, and if you can't tell by that sentence, that pretty much confirms it. But it doesn't look like it was the same. It's the same surgery. Obviously, it's the same throwing shoulder he had the surgery on in 2017, so that's a concern. But if again, price is a big part of all of these conversations. So if his price is going to be dropping, which it already is, it seems like, that's certainly something I'm interested in buying. Maybe less so in Superflex or Start 2, but certainly in Start 1. I mean,
yeah,
you're embracing that upside. So if you can get him at a discount, off of a top 8 quarterback, I'm interested in that.
Absolutely, and he easily would have finished as a top 8 guy if the shoulder hadn't failed him this year. Larry Fitzgerald has a new 1-year contract with the Cardinals. He's not going away. Gets another $11 million in the bank.
I don't understand why the Cardinals, who are they're in the middle of a rebuild, or they're starting their rebuild, I guess. I love Larry Fitz. I would love to see him actually on a team that could actually compete. I just don't see the reason to spend $11 million on the 37-year-old wide receiver.
36, I think. I don't think he's 38.
Okay, well, either way, who's not a part of their 3-4 year plan, 2-3 year 4 plan? It just doesn't make sense to me.
He'll be 36 right at the start of next year.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it probably goes more to his role in helping the development of Rosen and Kirk and some of these guys than it does in terms of winning. In terms of them thinking how many games he's going to add to their record. I think it's more. I think it has to do a lot with off the field and those sorts of things than it does necessarily in his production.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I just why pay $11 million? And it's one of those things where, as a Wolves fan watching them get rid of Garnett because they're not going to compete, why not let him try to get a ring somewhere else, or at least maybe take a little bit cheaper deal.
Yeah, it's a lot of money to spend for a team that probably does not look that great next year. I mean, the GM's definitely signing this to try to win because he's very, very likely to get fired next year if this team doesn't compete. But I question, as an organization, if it's the right call.
Yeah.
Jaguars have declined the 2019 team option on off-season darling Austin Seferian-Jenkins, making him a free agent. So he is back in the free agency pool again.
Oh, don't care.
Yeah, it's just landing spot will be interesting. And again, if you see these high pedigree, one of the things I found in my book that I think is, it would have pointed towards a guy like Eric Ebron coming into the season, is you sort of buy when high pedigree guys fall in terms of when they become dirt cheap. It's something you should be interested in. Again, with Seferian-Jenkins, there's a lot there that would have to go right in terms of him paying off that type of price. But let's see sort of where he lands to see, before making that determination, I think.
If you can get him for basically free, I wouldn't mind him as a lottery ticket, though. But I'm not.
Right.
I have basically no expectations.
Yeah, it's not. If he's there in the free agency pool, I need a backup tight end because I think he'll land somewhere, and then have a chance to start or at least be a backup who's going to see snaps. That's just it's a wait and see on a lot of things.
All right. Well, enough on the news. Let's go ahead and jump into our main segment here. We've been talking for almost 20 minutes already and talk positional roundtables, state of the league with running backs.
Postseason check-in.
All right, so I started with the best, and these are the guys who are clear-cut RB1s. In half-point PPR, they averaged over 12.5 points per game over 16 games. Gets you to 200 fantasy points for those of you doing the math. Starting off with the number one player, and I did include Week 17 in this, even if it wasn't perfect, but since we're looking for the future, that Week 17 performance does matter, was Saquon Barkley. We talked about him in a rookie episode. He looks like he's the real deal. Jordan, is there anything you want to get in on your thoughts on Saquon?
I mean, for me, he would be the 101 in a dynasty startup. I think that conversation's between him and Gurley, but for me, it's Barkley. Just in terms of you're getting three more years in his prime than you'd be getting Gurley right now. He's the best player in dynasty football to me, and I don't think there's not much more I can say about him than that.
I mean, and the biggest difference too, no knee injury history to go with.
Yeah, he's basically coming into the NFL. He was basically a bulletproof. Yeah, he's basically a bulletproof prospect, right? I mean, everything you wanted, he had. So, and one of the things too that like the research in my book, I created a metric called WARP, which is basically wins over replacement player. So you can basically measure how many wins a player will add to your team in replacing an average. For me, I use the 36 running back in a week, and it's just calculating weekly sort of how much they add, and you sort of measure that out. And I measured over 13 weeks because I think that the 13 weeks matters in terms of how you're building your team, whether you're going to make the playoffs, all of those decisions. That's sort of how I measure it. Mm-hmm. And he added 2 wins over replacement player. He was second only behind Gurley this year in terms of that metric. But you just look at you had people that had 101s in rookie drafts that were bad teams. I mean, they were adding 2+ wins to their team over the course of the regular season. That's just a massive fantasy impact.
Yeah, he was incredible this year, very consistent, almost 100 combo yards every single week. There's nothing else to like about him. He was easily the best prospect I've ever watched, and
probably will be.
For quite a while.
I mean, I don't even think we've seen his ceiling yet, which is the crazy thought that he's already the 101 on, I think it's DLF's, the DLF or our DFL's Dynasty ADP right now that they've done through mock drafts through startups. He is the 101, and I don't think he's reached his full peak yet.
He's got an aging quarterback with no answer there for that offense. The offensive line still isn't amazing. So yeah, there's still upside here.
That's insane.
All right, on to the number 2 guy, which is Todd Gurley. The injury was a little bit of a concern, and now kind of the shared workload with C.J. Anderson's a little weird, but for the most part, he is the 102 in dynasty formats.
Just use that. Everything you just said, use it, and then go buy him, because we won't be talking about C.J. Anderson coming into next season as taking 35 to 40% of the work share away from Todd Gurley. That's not going to happen.
I'm not sure what the numbers say, but I almost never will go out and buy most expensive running backs.
You'd have to give up a lot. You'd have to probably give up some depth or everywhere else. Just saying.
I would have to clean out my cupboard to go get guys like Barkley and Gurley. If I don't have them at this point, I'm probably never going to get them in those leagues.
Yeah, it's tough unless you're going to buy them low. Right?
Yeah.
So you either got to get them off an injury or like a Zeke suspension, right? Those guys, they just cost so much when they're young. I mean, they have the trifecta of being early producers at a young age. I mean, it's tough to, with good offenses going forward. I mean, that's a trifecta of value that's just tough to get around.
So yeah, well, I'd like to go buy them. You're just going to decimate a team's depth trying to go and do it.
Well, I mean, It depends. It depends on what type of trades you make. It's not impossible to go out and get them. You're going to have to give up some high caliber players if you want to, keep your depth.
We got players that are coming up that I'd rather go pay their significantly reduced price and get close value.
I completely agree.
CMC is up next. Came and showed us that he can be a true bell cow back. Had one of the highest usage rates in the NFL this season, I think only behind Zeke and Barkley. Showed a fantastic job of it this season. Do we have any concerns about him holding up, or does he look like he's ready to go?
It was interesting to me coming out of Stanford. He was an interior runner, and he was really good at it. I thought he was a highly intelligent runner. He saw holes. He did everything that you would want a lead back to be, except be 215 pounds. Is that how I love him to be used in the NFL? Not really. I mean, I think he's a generational receiver at the running back position. I just don't. Do I want to see him carrying 20 carries a game? Probably not. So the whole way CJ Anderson played out was interesting. That's how I would have gone about it. Well, he'll be take some of the workload off of McCaffrey, and they didn't go that way. So it'll be interesting to see if they go back to maybe with a rookie or something like that this year. That's going to be a situation. That backup running back spot in Carolina is certainly something I'm going to be watching in the offseason.
Yeah, that was the point I made when we talked about him. I do think they're going to draft somebody, or they'll bring in some smaller name in to at least take away some of the short work and some of the goal line work, especially if Cam Newton's going to not play or miss part of the 19 season. They're not just going to want to give him 30 touches a game. He's not built for that unless they do it in the receiving game and he takes less hits, which then it'll be great. But
I don't think they're going to lower his touches that much, though. I mean, he was a second-year player.
I'm not saying that they were going to.
He blew up on it. I think I'm more interested who they bring in just strictly from a handcuff standpoint, because McCaffrey could easily get hurt with this particular workload, and that's where their value is going to be, is more as a handcuff as opposed to something where they're bringing somebody in to actually take a decent amount of his work.
Yeah, this won't be a CJ Anderson type of situation that we all thought was going to happen, but I still think they're going to at least bring somebody in to help take some of the, some of those beatings away that he'll get.
All right, anything else on CMC there, Jordan? Jordan?
I'm with you guys. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of internet problems. I think my internet freezes because it's literally like 4 degrees outside. So sorry about that.
You're good.
And we're not much warmer. So. All right. So any other thoughts on CMC before we move to Alvin Kamara?
No, I think you guys pretty much hit it.
All right. Well, Kamara is kind of in a similar situation where he is a back who generally functions primarily as a pass catcher, was still very efficient and effective this season. Ingram might be heading away, though, so does that increase his stock at all, or do you just assume they're going to bring in somebody who will effectively take that role no matter what?
I mean, he was the RB1 for the first 4 weeks of the season, averaged 29.7 points per game. From week 5 on, he was RB5, 17.7. There's been rumors that Mark Ingram could take a hometown discount to stay with the team. That could happen. I think it will. I don't think it will. I think it could. I'll see the Saints probably drafting somebody if they do lose Ingram. That's always been Sean Payton's thing. There's never just been one complete guy. There's always been multiple pieces in this backfield. And I think it will continue to be that way.
I kind of like that. It's in the same vein as we talked about McCaffrey. Do we really want Kamara handling 20-plus touches? And I think the answer in the way they used him this year was clearly not, because they rode him a lot when Ingram was out, when he was suspended at the beginning of the season, and sort of backed off a little bit as that went along. Now, that's Ingram, yes, but I think that's also part Kamara and how they don't want to wear him down, because I think he's highly valuable in playing a satellite role. I don't think they want him, carrying 20-plus touches a game. I think they want him in the 14 to 18 sort of range.
Should he be valued as a top 5 back?
Oh, that's tough.
See, that's a more interesting question, right? Because I think yes, I think, but when you flip it around, the question to me is, at that point, what are you trading off at receiver? And so one of the things that I found in my book research is that anytime outside of the first 5 rounds that you take a receiver over running back, it's a mistake, because you're just burning away efficiency. And really the only time that receivers are close to running backs in terms of the metrics that I looked at, which were yearly finishes, all my warp data that I talked about, because it really allows you to compare positions against each other and sort of how useful they are to you. And starter games, all of those metrics point to the fact that the only time to really get receiver where you're not taking a huge hit on not taking a running back is early in a startup draft. So Kamara points to me as being that type of player. I love Kamara. I loved him coming out of the draft. I got to 107 in every draft that I could, whether it was trading down or trading up to 107, to sit there at 107 and take him. But I think at his cost, wide receiver, Hopkins, Beckham, those guys make a lot of sense sort of in that range, taking them over Kamara.
Okay. I mean, I would still agree that I would take Hopkins or Beckham over Kamara. It's close, but
I may even throw Adams in there just because of what we
Yeah.
talked about with the two most consistent receivers is Hopkins and Adams. It's been that way for 2 years for Hopkins, and Adams should continue to see that point, as I don't think Green Bay is going to, overcommit to the wide receiver in the draft this year. So, it's just all about what you think he'll be able to produce. If you can sell him off as a top 3-5 back, I'm not going to say you shouldn't. But he's a guy that I'm waiting to see what the Saints do with their backfield with him.
Let's go ahead and move over to the volume king. Ezekiel Elliott led the league in touches in 2 out of his first 3 seasons, including in 2018. Only back with over 300 carries. Only scored 6 touchdowns, though. Offensive line was kind of a mess. Do we think he looks better with the volume he's getting in 2019?
I think their offense is going to be better, right? I mean, they lost their center,
Frederick.
Let's hope he's okay. I mean, that seems like it's a more complicated issue than some of the other injuries that we see. So let's hope he's okay from a, just a health standpoint, let alone football, but it would be nice to get him back for Zeke. But I thought the offense was a lot better with Cooper there because I thought they had more threats, right? I mean, it just seemed like you knew that the only person that could really beat you was Zeke or Prescott with his legs, right? It wasn't they weren't very dangerous without Cooper. Now with Cooper, I think they can go to a different level in terms of their offense. But yeah, they love to have volume with him. One of the players that I had a ton across all my leagues was Rod Smith, just as that hedge, if something happens to Zeke, even where I didn't own Zeke, if something happened to Zeke, I wanted the backup there just because they run so much volume through their running backs. But I think he belongs in this conversation. The question for me is off the field. I mean, do you ever feel great about owning Zeke Elliott? That he's not out at some parade groping someone or any of that stuff. I mean, that is a realistic concern that he has done, and we've seen it on tape, right? This isn't a rumor. You have to worry about that with him. So that's a concern. Again, you're at this point, I think you have conversations about going receiver over Zeke, but I certainly see him as a top 5 running back.
I mean, we got to deal with that first, not him groping somebody, but him just being a complete douchebag firsthand. So
yeah,
I understand that, but I don't let that factor into me drafting the player because I own a lot of Joe Mixon, which is arguably just as bad, if not worse. So when it comes to that off the field standpoint, at least.
Probably the only time I get out of these phrases. In Joe Mixon's defense, he's kept his nose clean in the NFL.
I know, and
Yes.
and like for me, it's the same way with Le'Veon Bell and his off the field stuff. Now it wasn't 6 game suspensions, but this is Zeke's. I mean, he's like a guy that can almost be guaranteed to see over 300 touches on any given year.
Yeah, as long as he's healthy.
Yeah,
It's going to be interesting to see how they pay him, too, after giving him about 1,500 carries before his contract.
Le'Veon Bell situation again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, up next is probably my biggest man crush out of the 2017 draft class, and that was James Conner, who came in for the aforementioned Le'Veon Bell and rocked it up until he finally injured his knee late in the season, but overall looked fantastic and is in an offense that features one running back heavily. Where do we value him? 6 seems a little rich for me, but probably not too far off.
It's for me. I don't want to pay where I think his max value could be. We got to see a taste of what life could be like without James Conner in a couple games with Jalen Samuels. Now, on this show, we don't really like Jalen Samuels, but I'm interested to see if the whole one running back thing is going to continue if they get rid of Antonio Brown and there's less outside options instead of just Juju and then James Washington with him. You could see more Jalen Samuels. You could see more pass focus. I like Connor. I'm just not going to pay a mid to high RB1 value for him.
Yeah, it's interesting because he's going in basically the later part of the second round of startup drafts, behind guys like David Johnson and behind guys like Nick Chubb, that's a really interesting conversation, those two. behind guys like Mixon. So I think he's fairly priced there. I mean,
Yeah.
you sort of look at what goes around him, and there's no one behind him. I think that I would take over him. I think he belongs in the conversation with the guys that are there. So I think he's fairly priced, but that's not as a top. That's a couple spots down in terms of if we're just ranking these guys. So, I mean, I think he belongs in the top 10 in running backs. Do I love him this early in a startup draft? Taking him as a running back 6, I'll probably avoid him there. But fortunately, I loved him in rookie drafts, so I had a lot of them.
Yeah, me too. He's the one guy I basically just was like, any rookie draft I got.
I had no chance with you in my league getting him, so it's okay. I'm slightly over it.
All right, up next, Melvin Gordon, who would have finished higher if he had been able to stay healthy, but he got nicked up a few times over the season, dealing with the what was he dealing with? It was a hamstring injury that was just affecting everybody all season. So he got knocked out with that, but the games he was in, he was very effective. He's continued to develop as a pass catcher, something he did not have as a skill set coming out of Wisconsin, and now is coming to just a completely capable back, scores a lot of touchdowns, an incredibly high percentage of the team's usage. So he's probably a guy who you jumped over Connor and would be in that fringe top 5 conversation.
Yeah, I think so. And here's another guy that's going to be interesting with the contract situation, right? He's going into, I think he'll be a free agent after next season. So those talks will probably start heating up. Let's see how teams want to pay running backs. I think it's just going to be an interesting trend to watch with, like you said, with Zeke. But yeah, I think he belongs in this conversation, and he's a player that I didn't love on tape as much as I think he's gotten better from what I liked him coming with his tape coming into the NFL.
Well, he is so much better than he was his rookie season. He has really developed in a very impressive way.
Yeah. You just got to stay healthy. I think that's kind of been his thing. But the offense is there. This is a very good offense. This is a defense that can keep the game script in his favor. And I don't think there's going to be a true threat to Austin Eckler or Justin Jackson to take over his workload, because even when Gordon isn't being efficient on the ground, his usage in the passing game is what makes him that complete of a back and a guy I have no issue taking as a top 6-7 running back.
All right, let's quick move on to James White here. He did finish as the running back 8 on the season. Anyone who predicted he finishes in the top 10, go and collect your $1 million from Vegas.
And stop playing fantasy football because you're doing it, Ron.
What do we take of this? Because Sony Michel does appear to be the primary running back there, but the passing usage for James White was unbelievable this season. He stays healthy. How do you value a guy like this in Dynasty? Because I always find guys like this very difficult to want to go get, but on the flip side, when you have them, they're kind of valuable.
I mean, like, for me, it's Tom Brady loves him some James White, and he will speak up, make sure he gets his touches. Now, we've seen from time and time again, he'll fade off, so you can't rely on him as your RB2 and possibly RB3, which is right where I would, value him and trying to get him as my 3 or 4 running back on my roster. So he finishes an RB8, on the season. I would love to sell him for that type of value. You probably won't get someone to buy him for that. But
somebody who owns him in Dynasty? No. Zero chance.
But Michel has proven he can stay. He's, a banged up all year. He's not used in the passing game at all. And the Patriots have, again, no issue using 2, 3, 4 running backs in their offense.
Yeah, I thought he was more necessity than their desire, right? That they had so many injuries with Gronk never really at full strength, missing time, and then of course they had Edelman with his suspension, and when the full offense was actually on the field, which was rare, he was not this elite asset, which I think is probably the thing to take. Now I think he's again fairly priced. He's in the 70s in terms of overall ADP right now. I think that's fair, right? I think that you don't want to go paying, but he was trading at a top 5, top 4 round value in season, which I thought that was steep. So I think he's fairly priced now.
Yeah, his price has definitely dropped. The few spots I owned him, I tried to move him, but my league was not having it.
No, we weren't. No one's gonna bite.
But yeah, overall, I was impressed with what I saw of him this year. He's probably the premier pure pass catching back in the league right now, kind of similar to what Danny Woodhead was in his prime.
Yeah, and what Chris Thompson could have been if you can stay healthy.
That's never going to happen. All right, up next is the aforementioned Joe Mixon. Did finish as the running back 9 on an offense that was trending in the right direction. He did get dinged up a little bit in the year. Otherwise, he would have finished probably close to about the running back 6 or 7. And everything I saw on tape, but you just couldn't quite turn into stats last year, was trending in the opposite direction in 2018, and it was awesome.
Yeah, good luck trying to get him, though, because there's a lot of people like me out there who spent a lot of draft capital and this overall value trying to get him everywhere I can, because I expected this to happen. And we just talked about what we feel of the Cincinnati offense moving into the 19th season. So I think he's in line potentially for a top 7 to top 5 season, because, again, he's an all-around do-it-all back. Is what we saw on tape. It's why we loved him so much.
And very likely you may have no Geo there next year.
Most likely. And I don't think Mark Walton's going to be eating that target share up.
Yeah, and I get the impression that he's an interesting player in terms of perception, because everyone, I think, felt like it was a bad situation. He finishes as his top, he finishes in the top 12. He's an RB1, produces a win over replacement, and people are valuing him as a top 16 startup pick. It's sort of interesting that, I think that's, I'm not going to say too high, but I think it's higher than he's produced thus far. So it's an interesting, people have high hopes for him. So yeah, but I think he can get it. You look at a guy like David Johnson, who's right next to him. I think you can see rounds of gap between the two of them over the next 2 years.
Yeah, so it sounds like based on startup, his potential is already baked into his price to a certain extent.
Yes, whereas a guy like David Johnson, I don't think his floor is priced in. So yeah, I think but I do think Joe Mixon could be a top 5 dynasty running back. But he's priced much higher to that, I think, than he is at his current production.
I can agree.
All right. Speaking of David Johnson, he is up next. Finished as the running back 10 with the most disappointing running back 10 season of all time.
Right.
Only finished in the top 12 3 times. He basically running back 2'd himself into a top 12 finish.
Frank Gore?
Yeah. Frank Gore would be proud. Did it on a lot of touchdowns, very little volume. Didn't see the pass catching work that we want to see out of David Johnson, and the offense as a whole just let him down. Do we see brighter days ahead for him, or are we just worried about this offense taking so long to grow that it misses his window?
I don't know, man. You get paying for these guys that are in their late 20s at running back. I think it's a dangerous proposition. So, I just look at the opportunity cost on a guy like David Johnson. You're getting, Nick Chubb, Joe Mixon, James Conner right around him. You're getting Keenan Allen right around him if you want to go in a different position. Mike Evans is right there. I mean, those guys are all in a conversation together. It's tough for me to find a way to break a tie in favor of David Johnson talking about any of those guys. So does he have upside? Yes, but you're talking about a running back that's going to be 28. Do I like their opportunity to turn around their offense? I do. But there's not a lot of longevity on that. And, I mean, there's a lot of risk there with a guy at that cost, at that position, at that age.
Yeah, he will turn 28 in December of next year, by the way. So at least he gets through most of the season at 27. But yeah, you are starting to look at kind of the last probably 3 or 4 years of him.
So I guess in a champ window, if you feel like you're in a championship window, he's a guy that you can probably try to go out and buy from a team if they're not contending with said David Johnson. I think he performed this well with this bad of an offense. It can only at least get more consistent. Maybe not 2016, obviously, but
I don't think we're going to see that again.
No, I still have hope that he can at least produce for the next couple of years, at least at a high level.
All right, and then the free agent himself, Kareem Hunt, even after getting cut by the Chiefs late in the season, still did finish as a top 12 running back on the season, which just pointed to what he could do on that offense. Some rumors about him landing in Philly right now. Possibly could be in some other situations.
Chicago, apparently.
What is his price check here right now?
Well, we saw him go for a bag of chips and a 3rd-round pick in my league.
That was a mistake.
That was a bad. I saw him go for a high 2nd in my other league.
That's closer. It's probably still not quite enough.
Yeah, I think if I'm going to move him, I want at least a 1st. But the Chiefs' offense also proved that they can make Damian Williams a top fantasy asset in that offense. So we'll see. He's going to miss at least 6 games, I'm guessing, next year, if not more. It's going to be a PR nightmare for whoever brings him in. I don't think he'll get Ray Rice out of this, but I think this is going to be a lot longer road than I think people think.
There's too many teams already sniffing around him for it to be a Ray Rice situation.
Well, yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, I guess I would say I'm a little bit more bullish on him than I don't think he's going to face a 6-game suspension, because the 6-game suspension for the under the NFL rules, what that is specifically a domestic violence related offense, and this isn't that. So I don't think he's going to find himself in that category of suspension. So that's one thing that that I think points to optimism, is that. Do I think he's going to land with somebody? Yes. I don't think he's going to be I don't think it's a Ray Rice type situation. But I would say that, do situations get much better than they were in Kansas City? And I think the answer is probably not. Does he end up in Chicago? Has been commonly talked about. Philly, those places have good offenses, but we've seen just what Andy Reid can do with running backs. So you see him in the cost is certainly an interesting consideration, because you look at where he's going right now, which is in the, somewhere in the 50s. Right. Guys like Marlon Mack are going ahead of him, which I think Hunt's got clearly more upside. Carson's going ahead of him. Right. So I think there's juice on that particular spot. But if you sort of look at what that spot is historically, for my book, in the Analytics of Dynasty, one of the things I look at is startup value to rookie pick value, sort of what that trade currency looks like. That where he's landing is historically about the 105 rookie pick. And I don't think he's trading anywhere near that. So, that is an interesting value proposition for me, because I think, like you guys said, can you get it done with 2 seconds? I mean, you were talking about lesser prices than that, but I think you could conceivably get it done with 2 seconds. And that's certainly interesting that's certainly an interesting upside play for me.
Yeah. I mean, there's owners out there who are, who see this offseason, thing that happened to them. They don't want to own players like that, so they'll sell them out for dirt cheap. And then that's where you can get value that way. And that's what we've seen already, in the league that I run.
Yeah, I definitely would not try to sell off morality. I would at least hold until you start getting a team sniffing around for him. If you own him, you wait until a team signs. If you're buying, you try to do it now.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, it's interesting that it's closer to the 105 value in startups, but I've not seen him go for that expensive in a trade since the incident happened. I will say I do disagree on him not getting 6 games, even though it's technically not domestic violence. I think they'll treat it as a domestic violence situation, even if it's not using the same clause in the rules. They'll probably just give him a 6-game plus suspension, even if it's not technically domestic violence.
He'll appeal, and they'll probably go down the.
I mean, I think strictly for the kind of the black eye PR aspect, they're gonna just hit him real hard.
That's
for
what
it.
you think. No, it's
Yeah, they have to be
wild
they
card.
don't just get carte blanche on that, though, right? So that was a lot of the conversation about Zeke, right? When the conversation about Zeke, I thought was just bizarre. When you had people saying, "Oh, he's going to get 2 games," like the rule, and this is bringing my day job into this a little bit, but the rule on that was if he committed domestic violence, it's a 6-game suspension. And then if they find something that mitigated it, they could reduce it. There was nothing that mitigated Zeke's offense. Either he did it or he didn't. Now with Hunt, they're in sort of a little bit of a catch-22. They can't just, there's a collective bargaining agreement that they have to abide by. So they can't just slap down rules and violations on players just with whatever suspension that they want. There's a certain rule, there's certain rules that go along with that. So and considering the fact that he has already missed games and been on the commissioner's exempt list and those sorts of things, I think that will weigh into something lesser than a 6-game suspension in 2019.
All right. I think with some of the rulings on the Brady situation, they've kind of decided that Goodell can kind of slap down whatever he wants because it is a private dispute. But I'll be interested to see. If you get it right, I'll definitely give you a shout out on that because I think almost everyone is predicting 6+ for him.
Yeah, I'll take the under.
You'll take the under. All right. Let's move on to Philip Lindsay before we hit a beer review. Came in surprised as an undrafted free agent. We didn't even watch his tape coming into 2018 drafts.
Sorry, guys.
I heard some buzz in preseason and early training camp, so I picked him up in a few places for dirt cheap, and that worked out great for me. But overall, this was a guy none of us saw coming. Where do we value him? Is he kind of in this high running back 2 conversation going forward, or are we worried about Royce Freeman overtaking him?
I'm going to sell because I think Royce is going to make this more of a 50-50, and it's just going to be a nuisance. From an efficiency standpoint, Lindsay was fantastic. You got to see potentially the wear and tear from that towards the end of the year where it dropped off like a rock before he got injured. Now, who knows if he was banged up, prior to that without knowledge, at least to us. But I believe in Royce as a talent. I love him coming out in Oregon. I fully expect him not to just go away and for this to be maybe a Jonathan Stewart, D'Angelo Williams light, type of situation, or I guess a Mark Ingram, Kamara light type of situation.
Yeah, so one of the things I looked at in my book is running back weight, and Philip Lindsay's basically since 2008 is the lightest running back coming, and I measured it by combine or weigh-in weight entering the NFL. He's the lightest running back to finish as a top 24 running back. And he's more than 2 standard deviations outside of the average. So you're looking at a less than 3% shot. Betting on that long term, go ahead. I hope you're in my league because I'll take the other side of it. I can't get on board with that type of profile, and especially the guys that we see hit in the 180s to 190s. They're big time receivers, and he wasn't, right? I mean, he was doing it on just hyper efficiency. He was through most of the season, he was the most north-south runner in the NFL. What's that tell you? It was that the metrics that NFL.com was using, or that Next Gen Stats were using, is that he had the most efficient rushing, basically going down the field. He didn't have to go east-west, and that was just all good things that were happening, right? He just had all of this positive. Everything was going perfect for him. And I just don't want to make that bet. So he's a huge red flag player for me.
Yeah, I mean, he basically Alvin Kamara this season, where just hyper efficiency took over, and that was that.
Yeah, but I agree with you guys. I don't think he does it quite next year. He's going to be a real interesting prospect, both in startup dynasty drafts and looking at redraft next year to see where he goes.
I will not own Philip Lindsay because he'll go way too high.
All right. Well, that's all we got for the top 12. This has gone a little long, but I'm liking the discussion. Let's quick hit a beer review, and then we'll jump right back into the rest of our list.
Beer review.
All right, Dan, what did you think of Giantsbane by Fair State?
A lot of chocolate. It's a very good double stout. I don't get a whole lot of the coffee from it, which is all right. I think it drinks more almost like a double chocolate stout, where there's just a heavier amount of chocolate to it. But it's solid.
I don't think it mentions coffee anywhere.
Well, stout will traditionally have the roasted coffee notes to it, though.
It's got a little bit of roasted flavor to it.
There's
but
a
it's
lot
not,
of roast to it.
But it's not really coffee. I just get roasted chocolate, incredibly drinkable. I could not make mine last through all 12 players.
Yeah, I'm surprised I've held off, honestly.
Yeah, by about David Johnson, I was out.
Well, you can grab another. Well, it's upstairs, isn't it?
Yeah, that'd be a little tough when I'm hosting. Did you end up grabbing one there, Jordan?
I didn't. I have a soda on me. Maybe I'll get a beer at the end.
All right. Well, let's go
what
ahead.
What pop are you drinking, though?
I'm drinking some Coke.
Okay.
Classic.
Yeah.
All right, let's go ahead and jump into part 2, which is the running back 2s and a couple of the high flex guys who jumped in here. My range for this was any guy who averaged 9 points plus per game over 16 games. Starting off with 13, Tariq Cohen. We've talked about a bunch here over the last couple of weeks in our postseason recap episodes. So I don't think Dan and I need to talk about him too much more. Jordan, do you have any thoughts on Tariq Cohen and what his future outlook looks like?
Seems a lot more like the smaller running back that hits, right? Lindsey, we talked about, doesn't really fit the prototype of a small running back that hits. I think Cohen does. Is he a top 15 running back going forward? I'd be cautious at that price, but I certainly see him maintaining some fantasy relevancy, probably closer to being a running back 2, running back 3 type conversation than this high.
Yeah, this is kind of an everything goes right from here. He had a real high touchdown rate, which I don't think he hits on every single season. And if they get a north-south runner who's a better pass catcher than Jordan Howard, that may eat into his work a little bit. But I think going forward, he's probably going to be in that running back 20 to 28 conversation year in and year out.
Yeah, I'm just would like to see a little bit more consistency in his touches so I can gauge the value a little bit more.
Yeah, I thought Nagy was supposed to fix that.
Because I think weeks 1 through 4, he was like 5 or 6 touches a game, if that. And then it spiked up a bunch more, then it kind of just, it teetered every couple of weeks. And I don't want to deal with a back like that, at least if I can get high, price for him.
All right. Moving on, Derrick Henry. We talked about him a little bit before, but he basically rode his playoff games into a number 14 finish looking at the full NFL season here. He kind of does this every year where late in the season he pops up, gets interesting, and then disappoints you early in the next season. So are we buying in this time, or where are we valuing him going forward?
We did it over at uthdynasty.com. We do what we call the running back roundup every week. So we talk about every backfield every week, and we would just watch this Derrick Henry tape, and it would, if his feet stopped, the play stopped. It was sort of that type of thing. He just rolls hot at the end of the season. I think they used him better. The question is, does that sort of maintain? I don't necessarily think that's who they want to be offensively, but I was hoping that this wouldn't come, so that way he would be a value in startup drafts. But now he's in the 40s in startup drafts within an area that you have guys like Corey Davis, and he's going ahead of guys that I like Will Fuller and Sammy Watkins. So it's an interesting sort of comparison there. I think it's a fair price. I'm not sure I'm going to be on him at that, but he's going right next to Philip Lindsay, and I'd rather have Henry than Lindsay.
I mean, considering some of the wide receivers going around there, I'll probably just go with one of the wide receivers.
Yeah, I've always been on the I don't get why people love Derrick Henry train.
We have not liked him since the beginning.
But again, he shows up in cold weather, and when the team decides to shut down the usage of Marcus Mariota because he's banged up or already hurt and go more run focused, this is too high of a price already for me.
Without knowing more about what their new OC's tendencies are, I'm probably going to avoid as well. Yeah. All right. Another guy who I'm probably most likely avoiding, and you've already mentioned kind of a little bit too high baked in price, Jordan, is Chris Carson. Had an excellent season here, but he's got Rashad Penny just lingering there, who did flash from time to time this season, but could never wrestle the job away from Carson. I mean, you as an owner, you have to be at least concerned that this is going to be a chance at a committee next year, if not a situation where Penny could try to win the job outright from him.
Yeah, I can't get on board with, we talked, he's basically in the same valuation as Derrick Henry. And your rule in a startup draft should be, hey, let's focus on not missing in the first 6 rounds. And Carson seems like the perfect player that you're taking way too much risk on. The perfect player that would just miss that early because of the Penny thing. And what doesn't make sense to me is, if they like Chris Carson this much, why did they spend a late first round pick on Rashad Penny? Right? That just didn't make sense when they did it. I didn't think Rashad Penny was that good of a player. They had other needs, all of these things, but I can't sort of wipe that pedigree away without being concerned about, right, that they're going to use him over Carson, right? So Carson's more expensive than Penny right now in dynasty leagues, which is, I think, but it's not as far as you would think. You know, it's within basically, it's just over a round difference, and I think that's it's certainly an interesting thing. I think I'd rather have Penny than Carson.
Yeah, it sounds like this is I'm going to avoid a backfield until it shakes out more because Mike Davis had a role, J.D. McKissick the last week of the season had a role, and yes,
CJ Procise is still existing
CJ
for some reason.
Procise, whatever corpse of him is left. I mean, it's. I like Chris Carson. I love seeing running backs like him do that. I just think we're gonna see more Rashad Penny because he'll be healthy. Now he can't stay healthy. Carson isn't a model of perfect health, but they want to run the football a shit ton. So this could be if someone could win the backfield outright like Carson did last year, then I'll buy more into it. During the season. But as of right now, I can't do anything with it. I could sell him, and hopefully someone will buy him at a higher price than what he probably is worth.
One super deep name, like you sort of talked about that, there's a possibility that Davis is not there because of free agency. Super deep name that no one's really thought about is Bo Scarborough. He landed in Seattle. So, sort of along that line.
Oh, he didn't he?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, sort of along that line of a big bruiser. That's a name I think that you should file away and just keep in mind.
Yeah, I liked his tape coming out. I'm a little concerned about the fact that he's already on his third team, which is a real bad sign. But could be worth something. Definitely keep an eye on him in training camp next year.
But if there's one team that knows running backs, it's Seattle.
Seattle can turn any running back into something viable, and it's
At least
weird
that we talk about more than we should. I'm looking at you, Christine Michael.
Yeah. All right, up next is probably the shiniest name on the running back 2 list, and that is Nick Chubb, who didn't really get a starting opportunity until week, I believe it was 8 after the Carlos Hyde trade, and turned that into almost a 1,000-yard season. Had a great touchdown performance, showed as a better pass catcher than I think we were expecting, but we're hoping more development is there. And he's a guy who is kind of up in the low running back 1 range for startups in both Dynasty, and I expect he'll be there in redraft next year as well.
Yeah, I think he deserves that round 1 startup conversation, right? I'd rather have him over David Johnson. I think he's right around there with Mixon. That's certainly fair, right around the 1-2 turn.
Yep.
What's interesting to me, I thought, is people make a mistake, and I was talking about WARP earlier. I have another metric that sort of goes along with it called AWARP, which basically adjusts it for how often a player started. And one of the things that I found, which is I think it's interesting to think about, is that the AWARP of running backs that are basically selected between picks 4 through 6 of a rookie draft is a little bit more than the running backs at the top, right? So the 1 through 3s. And I think that if you think about that, it seems counterintuitive, but what's happening is you get guys like Nick Chubb and Kerryon Johnson who or Mixon to some degree, who fall a little bit in rookie drafts because he's blocked at the beginning of his career, where in reality that doesn't really hurt their value. And so guys like Chubb, I think that's a really important takeaway from the Chubb situation, is that these guys, Kerryon Johnson's the same way, is that if you get a discount on these guys in rookie drafts because they're quote unquote blocked, that should automatically make them a target player, especially when they're at that level of pedigree and that type of player. When these guys slip a little bit in drafts, they're clear target players, and you see that now. I mean, he's has the potential to be a top 5 running back going into the 2020 season. And when you get the opportunity and they fall in rookie drafts, they are clear target players.
I mean, we always preach that with both redraft and dynasty, you should tier players off, and then especially in dynasty, you should only adjust in tiers inside of the tier for situation. I would never move a guy in and out of a tier based on talent because their situation isn't good right now, because it can change so fast.
Yep.
Yes. And that's one thing we're not privy to any of that, right? So we don't know what's going on inside the building, right? We have an idea of just looking at it from the outside, what's happening, but talent wins out, right? And we saw that with Carlos Hyde, right? I mean, you take good talent because Nick Chubb's better than Carlos Hyde, right? And that ultimately wins out over the long term. So yeah, I'm totally with you.
All right. Up next is Kenyon Drake, the chronically underused. I recommended selling after he blew up at the end of 17 going into 18. He still finishes a running back 2, but it was a very kind of wishy-washy running back 2, and probably a lot of the weeks he blew up, you didn't start him. So what are we feeling about him with a new coaching staff coming into town, and he's flashed talent in back-to-back seasons?
I'm not overly excited about this. It's Miami, which has been a cesspool of the last